Marilyn Monroe, the epitome of a movie star, glamorous, gorgeous, sexy. But beneath the glitz was a troubled woman who battled anxiety and depression on a daily basis. A woman addicted to prescription drugs. In 1962, she was found dead in her Los Angeles home. Probable suicide was the coroner's conclusion. But irregularities in autopsy procedure and police failure to secure evidence at the scene left ample room for speculation. Suicide, accident, or murder? 40 years on, we'll reopen the case and find out what really happened to this screen legend. This actress is about to take part in an experiment with the assistance of a forensic psychiatrist.
Hi, Marika. Thanks for helping us out today.
The pills are placebos. If filled with the barbiturates Nembutal, the yellow pills, and chloral hydrate, the green ones, this cocktail of depressants would be lethal.
Shape and color as the Nembutal tablets, and we have 5 tablets that are the same size, shape, and color as the chloral hydrate tablets that she would have had.
This is a reconstruction of the death of Marilyn Monroe, the blondest, sexiest, most glittering of movie stars.
Okay, here we go.
Minute by minute, pill by pill, we'll attempt to discover what really happened in her Los Angeles bungalow on a hot August night in 1962.
1 minute and 5 seconds that it took to do all that.
Marilyn Monroe was only 36 when her life abruptly ended. Was her death a suicide, an accidental overdose, or a murder? The official cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning due to ingestion of overdose. The autopsy did find fatal levels of barbiturates in her blood and liver, but it turned up no evidence that Marilyn had actually swallowed the pills, which has left plenty of room for speculation. How did Marilyn Monroe really die? More than 40 years on, opinion is still sharply divided.
1, no question, Marilyn Monroe did not commit suicide. 2, that she was a victim of a homicide, that she was murdered.
Both John and Robert Kennedy have loomed large in various conspiracy theories. Over the decades, countless books and films have suggested that Marilyn was killed because she knew too many secrets and threatened to reveal them.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Another theory, though less dramatic, seems to fit the known facts more closely. That a woman who had attempted suicide 4 times before finally succeeded.
She then goes out the night before her death and fills a prescription for 25 tablets of the Nembutal when she had plenty of other medications that she could have used to make herself fall asleep.
But a third explanation is also entirely plausible. That she took too many pills by mistake.
Monroe liked the feeling of being under the influence of the sleeping pills. It gave her a woomy, toomy feeling that she liked.
Of the 3 scenarios, the one that keeps bubbling to the surface is that her death was a murder. It has several variations, often supported by self-proclaimed eyewitnesses. One such testimony came from a policeman who stated that he pulled over a speeding car near Marilyn's house on the night she died.
And I looked in the back seat and recognized Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General of the United States.
Far-fetched? Not if you believe this. That the window supposedly broken by Marilyn's psychiatrist to gain access to her locked bedroom could only have been smashed from within.
There were a number of witnesses that said that the glass was found all on the outside of the house, not on the inside, which would indicate that the window was broken from the inside rather than the outside.
We'll rebuild Marilyn's bedroom and turn it into a forensic laboratory. Through a series of experiments and reconstructions, we'll attempt to separate fact from fantasy.
And we're going to see which way.
The Unsolved History Inquiry is led by Daniel Martinez. The experts who will apply 21st century forensic tools to a 20th century tragedy are crime scene investigator Stephen Staggs, forensic psychiatrist John Chamberlain, and pharmacologist Nicholas Cozy. We'll also bring in two members from the original 1962 investigative team, psychiatrist Robert Littman and former Assistant District Attorney John Miner. Miner was one of only 3 people present at Marilyn Monroe's autopsy. Today, he is absolutely convinced that her death was neither an accident nor a suicide. Our investigation into how Marilyn Monroe met her end begins with the official version of events. The timeline is pieced together from eyewitness accounts in the original police report. August the 4th, 1962, a sweltering summer day in Los Angeles. A hot wind blew off the desert, a Santa Ana wind. Around 5 p.m., Marilyn's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, left the actress's house after a session of psychotherapy to treat her depression. Soon after 7 p.m., housekeeper Eunice Murray overheard Marilyn on the phone with the son of her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio. She seemed in good spirits. 7:45. Marilyn received a second call. Actor Peter Lawford, a Kennedy brother-in-law, asked her to dinner. She declined. Lawford later reported that Marilyn sounded incoherent. August the 5th, just past midnight. Mrs. Murray woke up and observed that Marilyn's bedroom light was still on. She knocked, but got no response. 3:30 a.m. The housekeeper tried once again unsuccessfully to rouse her employer. Worried, she called Dr. Greenson. From outside the house, Mrs. Murray used a fireplace poker to part the curtains on an open but barred bedroom window. Marilyn was face down on the bed. 3:40 a.m. The psychiatrist arrived. Finding the bedroom door locked, he used the same fireplace poker to break a closed, unbarred window. The position of the broken glass was to become a controversial piece of evidence. Greenson found Marilyn motionless on the bed, her hand still clutching the phone. Around 3:50 a.m., Marilyn's doctor, Hyman Engelberg, arrived and pronounced his patient dead. At 4:25 in the morning, the police were finally notified. When Los Angeles Police Sergeant Jack Clemens arrived at the scene, he found numerous pill bottles on the bedside table. One of them, a prescription dated 3rd of August for 25 Nembutol, was empty. Post-mortem tests on Marilyn Monroe's blood and liver showed massive amounts of Nembutol, enough to kill at least 3 people. So goes the official version, and this is more or less what the newspapers reported at the time. But questions soon emerged. Why did the forensic pathologist find no residue of Nembutol in the actress's stomach? Why, upon discovering the body, did one, then 2 doctors wait more than half an hour before calling the police? And why was the bedroom not declared a crime scene and treated accordingly? Marilyn's house was at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in Brentwood, a fashionable section of West Los Angeles. It's still there, but has been extensively renovated since 1962. For our investigation, we went back to the original plans. Conspiracy theorist Donald Wolfe knows the original house back to front. He spent years researching Marilyn's death.
So this is the room in which Marilyn was found.
Yes, her body was found here on the bed by Dr. Greenson and Eunice Murray, the housekeeper. Dr. Greenson was her psychiatrist. And the official story was that she had committed suicide and died here on her bed.
Wolfe has collected stories from all the people who witnessed or claimed to have witnessed the events of that night.
I know Sergeant Clements, when he first arrived on the scene, he immediately suspected that something was wrong, and he said he knew right away that her body the scene of her death had been changed.
The police investigator noticed something else unusual that night.
This room is the laundry room, and Sergeant Clements said that he had been in the bedroom asking questions of Dr. Greenson and Dr. Engelberg, and Mrs. Murray had disappeared, and he tried to find her in the house, found her back here doing the laundry, and he thought that was rather odd that here her boss had just died and she was in here doing the laundry, which was rather peculiar.
Adjacent to the laundry room was the guest room. The most popular conspiracy scenario says this is where the deed was done.
I believe this is the room where Marilyn actually died.
Right here.
Yes. In my conversation...
Wolfe says that an ambulance crew had been at the house much earlier in the evening, trying to resuscitate Marilyn.
They were going to take her, put her on the gurney and take her to the hospital. He thought she was well enough for that, but Greenson interrupted the process. And then when she started succumbing, he attempted to give her an adrenaline injection into the heart to revive her, but the needle hit a rib and she died at that moment. And that was at about 10:30 Saturday night.
This story was first put forward 20 years after Marilyn's death by a former ambulance driver who claimed to have been there. No evidence to support the claim has ever been found. But the implication that the movie star was murdered is certainly a serious one. Suicide or murder? It's difficult to prove either one conclusively with such a paucity of hard evidence. All that remains of the official police records is contained in a single folder. The original photographs of the crime scene have been lost. Only these grainy duplicates remain. It's an axiom that conspiracy theories thrive in a vacuum of concrete evidence. But in fact, a closer look reveals that there are still a good number of clues in the police file. On the morning of August the 5th, LA coroner Dr. Thomas Noguchi performed the autopsy under the watchful eyes of government lawyer John Miner. One thing that does still exist is the autopsy report. We used it to take John Miner back in time, to the pathologist lab as it was on the morning Marilyn's body was laid out.
Amen.
As an assistant district attorney, Miner observed thousands of autopsies. This is what he saw at 10:30 a.m. that August day in 1962.
We saw that livor mortis, that is, discoloration, had occurred in the facial area, and that tells us that she probably died in a face-down position.
When a person's heart stops beating, blood pools in the lowest parts of the body. This livor mortis, in Marilyn's case most apparent on the chest and on the right side of the face, gives the medical examiner the probable position in which death occurred. Dr. Noguchi's first task was to look for signs of violence. He found a couple of old surgical scars, but no evidence of trauma. Miner remembers vividly what they did next, and it casts grave doubt on the leading murder theory.
We checked her completely every square millimeter of the body with magnification, and there was no needle mark in her body.
That counters the ambulance driver's claim that Marilyn's death was caused by a botched injection. As the examination continued, the pathologist turned his attention to the actress's digestive organs. If Marilyn had ingested a large number of sleeping pills, it would follow that there would be a residue in her stomach.
The first abdominal organ that Dr. Noguchi examined was the stomach. He removed it, opened it up, and found about 20 cc's, 3 tablespoons, of a brown liquid substance.
No capsule material was detected in the sample, but were there traces of the barbiturates dissolved in the liquid?
Dr. Noguchi performed that test, and it was negative. There was nothing in the stomach to indicate that she had swallowed anything that was poisonous or the cause of death.
A curious result? Perhaps. But when a toxicologist analyzed Marilyn's liver and blood, he did find both a large dose of the sedative chloral hydrate and a massive overdose of the powerful barbiturate Nembutal. So why then was no drug residue found in the coroner's initial stomach test? Further toxicology testing should have provided an answer to that, and should have resolved the manner of Marilyn's death beyond a doubt. But for some unknown reason, normal procedures were not followed at the pathologist's office.
Those specimens disappeared. There were no microscopics, no toxicology done on any part of the organs of Miss Monroe except the liver and blood.
40 years on, this remains a source of frustration to Mina.
In a forensic autopsy, we must do everything that can be done to tell us how death was caused, and without doing all of the tests, that cannot be established.
So, there you go, there's the alarm bell.
So, how to proceed with our investigation? We can't analyze her tissue samples. Records of the telephone calls to and from her house that night are not available, and the death scene was never properly documented.
There was no declaration of a crime scene. There was no preservation of all of the evidence within the residence. This was some kind of almost criminal suppression of an investigation.
So what about the evidence that was found? Was anything overlooked at the time? Using what remains of the visual record, we're recreating the scene of Marilyn's death, as discovered by the Los Angeles police.
We'll start with the bed, which will go against that wall over there, and follow that with
Expert
the
help
dresser.
comes from modern-day crime scene investigator Stephen Staggs.
On top one of the... So that all looks good. Based on the photographs, her body was positioned as we see it now.
It doesn't take Staggs long to detect something amiss with the body.
I believe that the body had been repositioned before the police arrived. As an example, the autopsy report revealed there was more lividity in the right cheek than the left. That would indicate that the head was actually in a position like this.
Okay.
Marilyn's doctors reported that she was found with a phone receiver in her hand, but the police photographs don't bear this out.
The phone would have been on the floor with the receiver in her hand. However, the position of her hand here does not make sense. Her hand probably was more in a position like this with the receiver here. And then the sheets were not covering her when she was found.
Well, that paints a much different story than this photograph.
Yes.
And the fact that her hand is on the phone, what's that tell you?
It may indicate, if it in fact was a suicide, that she was making some sort of call for help or to talk to somebody at that moment.
What else can be learned from this reconstruction? Witnesses said that the bedroom door was locked from the inside.
The picture shows from the crime scene that this was a solid core door, a pretty heavy door, and a heavy locking mechanism also. In addition to the doorknobs, we have a deadbolt, thumb latch on the inside, keyway on the outside. If this in fact was closed and locked, it would pose a problem for someone trying to enter the room.
Housekeeper Eunice Murray and psychiatrist Ralph Greenson could not easily have broken down the door. And a door locked from the inside certainly supports the notion of suicide. Greenson claimed that the locked bedroom spurred him to urgent action. He ran outside and, using the fireplace poker, broke a window to gain entry. But conspiracy theorists who insist that the suicide scene was staged say that glass from the broken window was actually found outside, not inside the bedroom, disproving Greenson's version of events. Can we get to the bottom of this?
Steve, this is a reproduction of the window outside Marilyn's bedroom. I'm going to take a poker and punch through this glass, and we're going to see which way it falls.
Okay.
As the barbed poker is pulled back, it causes some glass to fall outside the window. So glass outside is not clear proof that the window was broken from within, nor that the suicide was staged.
Well, look at this. Quite a bit. Looks about 2/3 of it went inside.
And indeed, in one of those grainy photos, something shows up faintly that was never noticed in the police report.
And in this photograph, we see that there is glass on the floor inside below the window.
Well, then there's nothing really suspicious about the way the glass fell.
No.
It now appears that there's no reason to doubt witness reports that Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her locked bedroom. It also seems entirely possible that the broken window was smashed from the outside. And the autopsy report casts doubt on the ambulance driver's story. No needle marks were found on the body, and the location of pooled blood indicates that Marilyn died face down, not on her back. But there's still a compelling mystery to solve. If Marilyn Monroe died from swallowing enough Nembutal to kill a family of 4, why was no trace of it found in her stomach? Will modern toxicology be able to answer this disturbing question? A question that, after 40 years, is still being asked.
It's getting late. Hand me my slip.
Marilyn Monroe died at the age of 36, an early end to a troubled life. At the time of her death, the actress's movie career was already in a downward spiral. She suffered from crippling depression, was addicted to drugs, and had great difficulty fulfilling her professional commitments. She lived in a modest, sparsely furnished home. Is it credible that this broken woman, no matter how sexy and glamorous she appeared to the public, was at the center of a high-level murder conspiracy? A conspiracy involving the president and his brother, America's Attorney General. We've established that the massive overdose of barbiturates could not have been delivered by injection, but the autopsy, improperly conducted, did not prove that she actually swallowed the pills that led to her death. Could the toxic levels of Nembutal have been delivered in another manner? 2 decades after he attended the autopsy, John Miner had a sudden realization. Perhaps the coroner detected no pills because Marilyn hadn't taken any.
Dr. Deguchi performed a Y incision beginning at the point of each shoulder, coming to the opening the remainder of the digestive system. Nothing was significant until we got to the descending colon. And that portion of the descending colon, called the sigmoid colon, was discolored a deep purple.
This finding was noted in the autopsy, but Miner remembered another detail. the sigmoid colon was empty.
And it was very unusual. There was no intestinal content in the lower colon. But that indicated to me the probability that the barbiturate that killed Miss Monroe was administered to her by an enema.
If Miner's memory is correct, then conspiracy theorists are in luck. And unlike the injection theory, this scenario seems to fit the evidence. This version of events is that sometime on the evening of August the 4th, Marilyn took enough of the sedative chloral hydrate to knock her out cold. Whilst she slept deeply, someone prepared a Nembutal solution and administered a deadly enema to the actress. Is this improbable scenario really as likely as suicide? Perhaps. And there's still a problem with the suicide theory. If Marilyn swallowed an entire bottle of Nembutal, why was no trace of either the capsules or the drug itself found in her stomach during the autopsy? Dr. Nicholas Cozy, a renowned pharmacologist, set up an experiment to try and find out.
We've set up this apparatus to simulate Marilyn Monroe's stomach and the blood supply in her body.
Before Cozy administers a deadly dose, he must first determine exactly how much Nembutal was in Marilyn's body.
The coroner reported that Marilyn may have taken 40 or 50 Nembutals, but that amount does not square with the known concentration of pentobarbital in her blood.
Using figures from the autopsy and modern toxicological techniques, Cozy can now calculate the actual dose. Not 40 or 50 capsules, but 24, a number that the facts seem to corroborate.
It is known that she filled a prescription for 25 100 milligram Nembutals the day before. This is entirely in line with the amount that she had available to her, and it squares with the amount in her body.
How long would it take for 24 Nembutal capsules to dissolve in a person's stomach? First, human stomach acid and digestive enzymes must be replicated. Then the solution is warmed to body temperature, 37 degrees. In the carefully calibrated experiment, the contents of the upper vessel are agitated, mimicking the action of a real stomach. They will slowly empty into the lower vessel, allowing Cozy to calculate the rate at which Marilyn's exact drug dosage would have moved into her bloodstream. At 10-minute intervals, the pharmacologist will test the solution that represents the blood.
We want to get an idea of how long it takes for the barbiturate level in the blood to reach a level that would be lethal, and this will give us a rough idea of that.
For the experiment, we've tracked down the same yellow gelatin capsules that Marilyn would have taken. If the capsules don't dissolve before the barbiturates reach a lethal level, then the conspiracy proponents will have a persuasive argument for murder.
I'm adding the Nembutal.
If they do dissolve, then the autopsy findings are not at odds with Marilyn's having swallowed the fatal dose. 2 minutes in, this is how her stomach contents would have looked.
Most of the capsules have started to dissolve. There are no intact capsules left at this point.
A quick visual inspection of the lower vessel shows there is not yet any significant amount of barbiturate in her bloodstream.
It's incredible how quickly these capsules have dissolved. It's been less than 3 minutes and are almost entirely dissolved at this point.
7 minutes later, not a single capsule fragment remains.
This represents the 10-minute sample.
The orange dye will turn pink when the amount of drug in the test bloodstream reaches the point at which Marilyn would have lost consciousness. At 10 minutes, there's no detectable color change. In fact, it would have taken 20 minutes for her to pass out. The experiment provides an explanation for why there was no capsule residue in Marilyn's stomach at the autopsy. The pills would have dissolved before she was even drowsy. The artificial stomach fluid has a yellow cast to it from the dissolved colored gelatin capsules. Why wasn't this detected? Because it would have drained quickly from Marilyn's stomach within 20 to 30 minutes.
It's not surprising at all that no capsule residue was found in her stomach or intestines. Once these capsules have dissolved, the drug and gelatin will be absorbed and essentially disappear. You know, if there was something in her intestine, the presence of bile would have obscured any potential yellow color. So this is entirely a red herring.
So the most compelling argument put forth by those who cry murder has now been dispelled. Dr. Cozy can also explain why there was no trace of barbiturate crystals when Marilyn's stomach liquid was analyzed in the autopsy.
It's not surprising that there weren't any refractile crystals because the pentobarbital is absorbed so quickly and the capsules disintegrate so quickly that within 30 minutes, the pentobarbital and the capsules would have been gone from her stomach.
In fact, the autopsy does contain an important finding that supports the notion that Marilyn Monroe swallowed a large number of sedative capsules. Her stomach lining was inflamed.
The report mentioned the presence of small pinpoint hemorrhages in her stomach mucosa. And this is consistent with irritation caused by a high dose of pentobarbital actually on the stomach lining itself.
At this point in our investigation, murder by injection seems unlikely. And here's another blow to that theory. Not only were there no needle marks found on Marilyn's body, but there was a high level of Nembutal in her liver.
This suggests that the drug had time to move from her blood into the liver.
And that suggests that she was alive for at least an hour after taking the capsules. A barbiturate jab of that strength would have killed her in minutes, not hours. Assuming now that Marilyn took 24 Nembutal capsules by mouth, we've seen that they would have taken effect in about 20 minutes.
Maybe an hour after that, she went into a state of respiratory depression. She stopped breathing. Eventually, her heart stopped beating, and she died.
If this is what really happened to Marilyn Monroe, was the act a deliberate suicide or an accidental overdose? To answer that question, we return to the reconstruction of her bedroom the night she died. Here, finally, we get a glimpse into the movie star's state of mind. What was Marilyn Monroe's mental and emotional state around the time of her death?
We know that she was chronically anxious. She was often late to shoots because she would become so nervous that she would have to redo her makeup. She would vomit at times.
For many celebrities, the contrast between public and private personae is distinct. In Marilyn's case, it was extreme. The bedroom at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in Brentwood reveals a great deal about the anguished private world of Marilyn Monroe.
Wow. One of the things that we see that is really powerful is the lack of decoration. Nothing like a poster, picture, or anything that says, I live here. There's tapes, bags, letters, pill bottles all over the nightstand.
This disarray is in fact a hallmark of the heavy drug user.
So what I'm looking for is any evidence of pills, that she's vomited.
Chamberlain is seeking physical clues that might reveal Marilyn's last actions.
And I still don't see that. I still don't see any evidence that there was any kind of violence towards her. I look at her neck to see if there's any...
The tranquility of the body would indicate either suicide or accident. There is no note, no grouping of treasured objects.
So we don't find a shrine, we don't find a note, And not having those doesn't help us very much. Most suicides don't leave either one of those, so it could still be an accident, it could still be a suicide.
In fact, there's only one piece of evidence in the room that points to suicide. The door locked from the inside.
We can see that the door is locked. Now, Marilyn Monroe usually slept with the door unlocked but closed. And here, on a night when she died, she chooses to lock the door. This is very unusual behavior, and we look for evidence of unusual behaviors when we're trying to analyze whether something was a suicide or not.
A single act that departs from customary behavior is not quite enough to say for certain that the actress deliberately took her own life. It wasn't sufficient proof for the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office in 1962 either. To determine the true manner of death, a group of psychiatrists, the so-called suicide team, was hired to investigate.
That particular fact that the door was locked does suggest intention to die. The main problem why I call this a probable suicide rather than straight out suicide was that in the past when she made suicide attempts, she had let people know about what she was doing.
Dr. Littman knew that Marilyn had tried suicide before, 4 times before, but circumstances had changed. In the months leading up to her death, Marilyn had become addicted to sleeping pills. She was averaging 8 pills a day by July of 1962.
Dr. Greenson, he told me that Monroe liked the feeling of being under the influence of the sleeping pills.
Was the actress's death a tragic accident? Did Marilyn, already high on sedatives, simply lose count of how many pills she was taking?
And what we're going to do for this experiment is just see how quickly you can take all of these tablets and get them in, all 30. Now, none of these tablets actually have medication in them. They're just hollow gelatin capsules. So there's no risk to you from taking them. Okay, here we go.
First, the forensic psychiatrist will see how long it takes to swallow 5 chloral hydrate and 25 Nembutal capsules in a single go.
It's about 1 minute and 5 seconds that it took to do all that.
If Marilyn did commit suicide, she could have done the deed in just over a minute, with only a few gulps of water.
Half a bottle. Okay. Then I'm going to have.
But what if she took just a few pills, then, impatient to feel higher, took a few more, then lost track and overdosed? Can a timeline be created for an accidental overdose that fits the evidence?
We're assuming that since Marilyn was using these for a prolonged period of time, that she probably had some tolerance to the sleep effects. So we're going to say, for the sake of argument, that she doubled the dose or maybe even quadrupled it by taking 4 instead of 1 to 2.
It's possible to measure the rate at which the barbiturate levels rise in the artificial stomach.
So we're going to wait a little while to let the tissue levels of those pills rise so that they start having an effect on her.
Chamberlain believes that just 10 minutes after taking 4 Nembutals, Marilyn could have forgotten she had taken any at all. She now had 800 milligrams of pentobarbital in her body, but none of it had been absorbed into her system. The psychiatrist allows another 10 minutes to pass.
So we're going to have you take 4 more of the Nembutal tablets now.
She now had taken just half the number of capsules that were found in her body. 20 minutes after the first dose of 4, the barbiturate would have taken effect and forced her to sleep. But if asleep, how could she have swallowed the other 12 Nembutals that were detected in her blood and liver? She couldn't have. The overdose could not have been an accident. So the 1962 suicide team's suspicions have been borne out.
There was a very high level of overdose. That tells me that the victim had to take a large number of pills in a hurry, because once you start taking sleeping pills, you're going to fall asleep in 15 to 20 minutes at the most.
The simplest explanation is that she took 24 or 25 doses of Nembutal in one episode with the intention of committing suicide.
The result of this experiment makes a powerful case for suicide and weakens the arguments of those who believe in a conspiracy. But there's one bizarre theory that so far hasn't been ruled out: that Marilyn was murdered by a barbiturate-laden enema. Ever since the autopsy of Marilyn Monroe on August 5, 1962, former Assistant District Attorney John Miner has doubted the official finding of probable suicide. As part of her treatment, Marilyn's psychiatrist, Ralph Greenson, had asked her to randomly speak her thoughts, to free associate. She recorded these ramblings on audio tape in the months leading to her death. Dr. Greenson allowed Miner to listen just once to these tapes.
No one could possibly believe this woman had killed herself. Not possible. In these tapes, she speaks of her plans for the future.
This, coupled with the discoloration of the actress's colon, led Miner to believe that Marilyn did not swallow the Nembutal. He thinks the drug overdose got into her body by another route. But for her to have endured the procedure, she must have been thoroughly sedated beforehand. This, in fact, could be explained by the drug chloral hydrate, also detected in her system at the autopsy.
It's very difficult to imagine that the enema is administered, the lethal dose of barbiturate is reached in her blood, and that she doesn't lose control and simply evacuate the contents of the enema. And so we'd be having to imagine in our scenario that she's being held while asleep or while struggling in such a way that she's not allowed to evacuate this enema.
But Marilyn's body showed no signs of a struggle.
I reviewed possibly 2,000 overdose deaths. None of them were by an enema. Seems strange that this one would be by this method, nor was it customary or popular to give barbiturates by enema in the 1960s in Los Angeles.
Perhaps the most important clue to the true manner of death in the case of Marilyn Monroe was concealed in her nightstand. The sleeping pill she ordinarily took was a milder, safer drug than Nembutal, called Librium. In the month before her death, she was averaging 3 to 4 Librium a day.
We know that she had plenty of other Libriums in the house and that were still in the bottles when she was found that she could have used to help herself fall asleep and are much safer. And it really makes you question her motivation in going out and getting those additional Nembutal tablets.
This suggests that her intent with taking the Nembutal was not to fall asleep, but rather to commit suicide.
It's possible that the strangest, certainly the saddest thing about Marilyn Monroe's death was the state of her life at the time. The most glamorous woman of her day died alone, a barbiturate addict, in this shabby bedroom.
Here was a beautiful woman, symbol of attractiveness, and she did not have a date for Saturday night.
We know that her great-grandfather committed suicide during the Depression. We know that her grandmother on her mother's side suffered from depression. We know that her own mother suffered from depression and psychosis and had to be institutionalized.
Depression is acknowledged to run in families. Marilyn's suicide should have been no surprise. This woman had made 4 previous suicide attempts. Each time, she'd been rescued after calling for help. Did the movie star attempt to call a friend on that hot August night in 1962? Based on her body temperature at autopsy, 32 degrees or 89 degrees Fahrenheit, the time of death was placed between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. This means she would have taken the overdose sometime between 8 p.m. and 1 in the morning.
It's difficult to know exactly when Marilyn died, but it's entirely possible that she could have lived for an hour and a half, even 2 hours.
The last person to whom she is known to have spoken is Peter Lawford, who died in 1984. He recalled that Marilyn's speech was slurred and trailed off. This call may have taken place as late as 9 p.m. If this is so, then Peter Lawford may well have been the last man to hear the farewell of a screen icon. Or perhaps he was the man who failed to hear a final, faint cry for help. About this, it's likely we will always be left to wonder.
I speculate that she was feeling depressed and abandoned. And in that feeling of being depressed and abandoned, decided to take the pills. And in her mind was the feeling that for sure she would be away from the feeling of loneliness and abandonment. And in her mind was the knowledge that it could kill her. And in her mind was the knowledge that she might be rescued. And in her mind was the wish that somehow her life would change.
Coming up next, the hidden clues to terrible crimes can be discovered in the most unlikely everyday substances. Forensic detectives discover the elements of murder. Next.